There is a moment every morning that almost no one notices. It lasts only a few seconds. No headlines have reached you yet. No messages demand your attention. No one has told you who you need to be today. For a brief instant, your mind is still untouched. And then, the world arrives. A glowing screen, a list of problems, expectations, deadlines, comparisons, noise. Most people believe their day begins the moment they open their eyes. But the Stoics believed it begins much earlier. It begins with the very first thought you allow to enter your mind. Nearly 2,000 years ago, before the Roman Empire stirred awake, one man understood this better than anyone alive: Marcus Aurelius. History remembers him as an emperor who commanded armies, ruled over millions, and carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders. But that was never his greatest victory. His greatest victory happened in silence, long before the generals sought his orders, long before the petitions filled his desk, long before the fate of Rome rested on his decisions. Marcus faced an enemy that could never be defeated by a sword: his own mind. Every sunrise, he understood that two invisible forces would compete for his attention. One whispered fear, the other whispered purpose. One promised comfort, the other demanded character. And whichever voice spoke first would quietly shape every decision that followed. What Marcus discovered wasn't simply a philosophy for ancient Rome. It was a timeless understanding of how the human mind works. Today, modern psychology and neuroscience are beginning to explain what he had already learned through observation and discipline. Your brain is constantly searching for direction. The question is, who gives it that direction first? Is it your own deliberate mind, or is it a world that profits from your distraction? Because before you win the day, before you build discipline, before you find peace, there is one invisible battle that must be won, and it begins before you even leave your bed. The strange thing is, your greatest obstacle isn't a lack of motivation, it isn't a lack of intelligence, and it certainly isn't a lack of potential. Your greatest obstacle is that your brain was never designed to make your life easy. It was designed to keep you alive. Thousands of years ago, your ancestors didn't wake up wondering how to become more productive or fulfilled. They woke up wondering if they would survive until sunset. So the human brain evolved with one priority above all else: find danger before danger finds you. That ancient survival system still lives inside you today. It doesn't care that you have deadlines instead of predators. It doesn't know the difference between a lion hiding in the grass and an email that makes your heart race. To your brain, uncertainty is uncertainty. A threat is a threat. And every morning, before your rational mind is fully awake, that survival system quietly begins scanning your world for what could go wrong. This is why one negative thought can appear before you've even left your bed. What if I fail? What if today goes badly? What if I'm not ready? Most people assume those thoughts reveal reality, but they don't. They reveal programming. Modern neuroscience has given this process a name. Your brain constantly predicts what is likely to happen next based on what it has experienced before. It builds shortcuts to save energy, repeating familiar patterns instead of creating new ones. That is why yesterday has a way of becoming today, and today quietly becomes tomorrow. Without realizing it, many people aren't living new days at all. They're reliving the same day with different dates, the same worries, the same reactions, the same stories, repeated so often that they begin to feel like identity. I've always been anxious. I've never been disciplined. I always give up. At first, these are only thoughts, but repeated often enough, they become beliefs, and beliefs become the invisible architecture of a life. Marcus Aurelius understood this centuries before anyone could scan a brain or map a neural pathway. He knew that every repeated judgment carved something into the human character, not because the world changed, but because the person interpreting the world changed. He once reminded himself that the mind takes the shape of the thoughts it entertains most often. Think about that for a moment. If you spend every morning rehearsing fear, your mind becomes familiar with fear. If you spend every morning feeding distraction, your attention begins to obey distraction. Not because you are weak, because repetition is one of the strongest forces in human nature. Every thought you repeat is like walking the same path through a forest. The first time, it's difficult. The 10th time, it's familiar. The 100th time, it becomes the only road you can see. But if one path can be built, another can be built too. And that is where the Stoics saw something that most people never notice. They realized that the first moments of the morning are not ordinary moments. They are the doorway through which your entire day enters. And whatever walks through that doorway first often decides everything that follows. Imagine your mind as an ancient city. Massive stone walls surround it, strong enough to withstand storms, high enough to keep invaders away. But every city has one vulnerable place, the gate. Not because it is weak, but because every visitor must pass through it. Every morning, before your day truly begins, the gate to your mind quietly opens. The question isn't whether something will enter. Something always does. The real question is, who enters first? Does fear walk through the gate? Does comparison arrive carrying yesterday's disappointments? Does anxiety rush in, convincing you that the future is already against you? Or does something else step forward? Purpose, gratitude, discipline, the quiet decision to meet the day with reason instead of impulse. Marcus Aurelius understood that he couldn't stop every visitor from knocking. No human being can. Fear will knock. Frustration will knock. Anger will knock. Loss will knock. The Stoic never imagined a life free from difficult emotions. Instead, he learned something far more powerful. You don't have to invite every visitor inside. One of the greatest misunderstandings about Stoicism is the belief that Stoics tried to suppress emotion. They didn't. They questioned it. Before accepting a feeling as truth, they asked a simple question. Is this judgment helping me see reality? Or merely my fear? That single pause changed everything, because between an event and your reaction lies something almost invisible. Interpretation. Two people can experience the same setback. One sees proof that life is unfair. The other sees an opportunity to become stronger. The event is identical. Only the meaning changes, and meaning shapes behavior. This is why two people can wake up on the same rainy morning. One complains before breakfast. The other smiles, makes coffee, and gets to work. The weather didn't create their attitude. Their interpretation did. Marcus trained himself to guard that interpretation with extraordinary discipline, not because he believed the world would become easier, but because he knew the quality of his judgments would determine the quality of his life. Modern psychology has arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion. Researchers have found that the brain doesn't simply record reality, it actively interprets it. Every second, your mind filters millions of pieces of information, deciding what deserves your attention and what should be ignored. In other words, you never experience reality exactly as it is. You experience reality through the lens your mind has built over years of repeated thoughts, habits, and beliefs. If that lens is clouded by fear, neutral situations begin to feel threatening. If that lens is shaped by resentment, even kindness can look suspicious. If that lens is trained toward purpose, obstacles begin to reveal opportunities that others never notice. The world outside may remain exactly the same, but your inner world quietly changes the world you see. And that is why Marcus never began by trying to control Rome. He began by governing the only kingdom that was completely his own, his attention, his judgment, his character, because once those were in order, everything else became easier to face. Not easier because life had changed, easier because he had. So how do you actually reclaim your mornings? Not with a perfect routine, not by pretending you'll never feel anxious again, and not by repeating empty words you don't truly believe. Marcus Aurelius practiced something far more demanding. Before the world could test his character, he tested it himself. Each morning, he reminded himself that the day ahead would not unfold according to his wishes. He would meet impatient people. He would face unexpected setbacks. He would make mistakes. Plans would fail. Comfort would disappear. But none of those things would determine the kind of person he became. That decision belonged to him alone. At first, this sounds strangely pessimistic. Why begin the day by expecting difficulty? Because the unexpected only has power when you expect life to obey you. The Stoics understood a truth that modern psychology continues to confirm. The brain suffers far less from hardship than it does from violated expectations. We are rarely shaken simply because something difficult happens. We are shaken because we quietly believed it shouldn't have happened at all. But when you prepare your mind for uncertainty, you stop wasting energy arguing with reality. You adapt faster, you recover faster, you think more clearly. The storm may still arrive, but it no longer catches you asleep. Imagine beginning tomorrow with a single question, not, "What will happen to me today?" but, "Who will I choose to be today?" One question keeps your attention trapped in circumstances. The other returns it to character. That small shift changes everything because every decision you make afterward begins flowing from a different place. You become less interested in controlling outcomes and more committed to controlling your conduct, less obsessed with being admired, and more concerned with becoming honorable, less distracted by the opinions of strangers, and more faithful to the principles you have chosen for yourself. This is the quiet strength that made Stoicism endure for centuries, not because it promised an easier life, but because it taught people how to remain steady inside a difficult one. Think back to the beginning of this video, before the notifications, before the conversations, before the responsibilities. There was a brief moment of silence. Most people rush past it. Marcus Aurelius treated it like sacred ground, because he knew something our modern world often forgets. Your life is not built in the loud moments. It is built in the quiet decisions that nobody else ever sees. The decision to pause before reacting, the decision to question your first impulse, the decision to guard your attention instead of giving it away. Those choices seem insignificant until you repeat them, day after day, month after month, year after year. Then one morning, you look back and realize you didn't change because one extraordinary event transformed your life. You changed because thousands of ordinary mornings quietly transformed your character. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again. The world will compete for your attention. The headlines will still be waiting. Your phone will still be within reach. None of that will change, but something else will also be waiting. A few silent seconds, small enough to ignore, powerful enough to shape an entire life. The question is not whether tomorrow will test you. It will. The real question is, when that first thought enters your mind, will it belong to the world or will it belong to you?